why I love the book is, I am tired of this more cooks in the kitchen. We need a different recipe, right? We have oversold fiscal and monetary policy. If fiscal deficits could make countries rich, then no country would bother being poor. I've spent the last few years on the RBI board. I haven't decided whether monetary policy is a placebo or a painkiller or a steroid. It's not a medicine for sure. And so we've oversold fiscal and monetary policy, which is really just more cooks in the kitchen. But the 10x ROI, which he sort of identifies, is really coming from a new recipe. It's not coming from more cooks in the kitchen. And I think the three principles which he talked about, he only mentioned scientific, right? He said that you try to understand the world. But you also try the engineering approach, which is often the prose, which is sort of using that understanding of the world to solve real world problems. And the third leg, which he talks about in the book but didn't mention, was the ethical leg, right? Which problem do you focus on? Because it's silly to say we're going to solve all problems or we have the resources. There are resources. What is strategy? Strategy is the art of resource constraints, handling them. So we do have to, there's a difference between the list of ingredients and the recipe, right? Anybody who doesn't know how to cook like me, if I don't have the recipe, the nazakat lies in the recipe, right? The proportioning, the sequencing, rather than just the list of ingredients. I think there are thousands of economic books about the list of ingredients, but this one has a more recipe flavor to it. So just in sort of, I wanted to wrap up in quickly talking about the way forward, because I think both of us have chatted a lot about this, and one of my favorite framings of development is Ricardo Hosman's game of Scrabble. Right? Development is a game of Scrabble. You want to make longer words, you want to make more words, and the government provides the vowels and the private sector provides the consonants. How do we get the government to provide more vowels? And plus, who's going to? Is it going to be the central government or the state government? So I think the first obvious answer, which he has already, which is the premise of his book, but I don't think is the premise of most Indians, is that state-led development is the way forward. But I think, so teamwork will have to be key. I don't think we're going to be able to say that states and center will sort of, which is more important. We will need more teamwork between the state and central government. But I think we need another form of teamwork between the private sector, the government, and non-profits, right? All of us like to sort of look down upon the other person, but the private sector has a trust deficit, the government has an execution deficit, and non-profits have a scale deficit. So I think teamwork is really key to going forward. I think more risk-taking is really important. I think we have picked the low-hanging fruit. You will have to take on some vested interests. Nobody cuts the branches they're sitting on. You'll have to take more risks. And we'll have to make it easier for bureaucrats to take risks, right? Because today, because of this whole corruption drama, anything that goes wrong, you don't distinguish between fraud, incompetence, bad luck, and bad judgment. Anything that goes wrong is sort of considered fraud, and then you go into corruption. So no bureaucrat is going to leave their fingerprints on any murder weapon if we don't learn how to distinguish between fraud, incompetence, bad luck, and bad judgment. And the third most important one, which Karthik makes the case for, and we've talked about a lot, is sort of the long-term thinking. A 25-year plan is not 25 one-year plans, and just being a good ancestor, as Jonas Salks used to say, that's our biggest responsibility. I think increasingly politics and business and everything is forcing, there's no fiscal conservative left in the world. In fact, I remember a particularly difficult email exchange in a difficult bank, which we saw at RBI, right? I don't like banks overall, but banks in trouble are particularly problematic, right? They remind me of Pakistan. Pakistan, as Steve Cohen says, is the only country which negotiates with a gun to its own head, right? And bad banks always do that. But this particular bad bank, there was a treasury guy selling a bad 500 crore derivative, and the risk management guy says, why are you doing this? We will lose money in 3 years, and the client will lose money in 8 years. So the treasury guy replies, IBG, YBG. So risk management says, what do you mean IBG, YBG? He says, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. I think that's a core of sort of this problem that Karthik is trying to solve, which is this thing that you have to face elections every 5 years. But the rewards of most of this stuff that we do, the pain that we impose, as he said, comes after 5 years. But being good ancestor is an objective for many people. So if you wanted to think about mass prosperity, in my mind, how are we going to narrow the gap between a third total GDP and 125th per capita GDP? Of course, it'll be hard power. I mean, we need power, right? India was weak for many years and it drove all of us crazy. You know, my favorite poet, Ramdari Singh Dinkar, says, Shama Shokti us bhujang ko jiske paas garal ho. Only the powerful can be kind, benevolent, and generous. And so, hard power, of course, is 10 more mountain brigades, 5 more Rafale squadrons, or 2 more aircraft carriers. There's soft power also. But mass prosperity is a little different. I think I memorized Pandit Nehru's speech when I was a child, but we missed touch with destiny, right? The 200 million people who will never read the newspaper that they deliver, or sit in the car that they clean, or send their kids to the school that they have built. But as Karthik points out, this is not a problem like cancer or climate change. This is a plumbing problem in some sense, right? And now that Karthik has identified the solutions, I think this is a plumbing problem that we will fix. And that is really our new appointment with our destiny.